Let me ask you this: do you feel like God's around most of the time? Do you feel like when you pray? Do you feel like I can sense His presence, or is it what's it like?
Sometimes. I was thinking about this yesterday. I rarely get a chance to like go for a long walk on tour. A tour is usually this frenetic thing where you're just sound check to radio station to show to whatever. And yesterday we played a show in Montana at the university right next to this beautiful mountain. So there's this trail that goes up, and I was walking around thinking to myself all the thoughts that I didn't have time for the past month on tour. And one of the thoughts I was thinking was, it's easier for me to believe in God than it is for me to believe that God loves me.
Uh-huh.
And I was thinking, why is that? And I think it's this, I mean, again, it's awkward to talk about these things in front of cameras because I don't know what I'm talking about.
I don't either, but that's why I knew you'd say that, which is why I wanted to talk to you about it. 'Cause otherwise, it's going to be like the rote.
Yeah.
Christian thing to say, and I'm not interested.
And I think for me, the reason why I write songs is actually because that gray area interests me and terrifies me.
Mm-hmm.
That songwriting can be this bridge to talk about things that I don't understand and ask questions. I mean, we played a song last night, a song called Vice Verses, that asks literally, where is God in the genocide?
Mm-hmm.
And those are questions that I don't have answers to. You look at this broken, decrepit struggle on our planet, and you think of the human race and all the atrocities we've committed. I mean, and then the atrocities we've committed in the name of Christ or Allah or whatever it is, and it's just like, okay, what was this thing about God again?
Mm-hmm.
How do you make sense of that?
I don't even understand, honestly. Like, you're a C.S. Lewis fan, right? So, but he makes the argument from morality, like that we know God exists because we have this arrow that's inside us that's pointing towards what's true and what's good, and it crosses all cultural divides, which I think is largely true. But yet, when I'm reading the Old Testament, there's a lot of stuff that God's doing where the alarms are going off.
Right.
So I'm kind of, if I could sit down with C.S. Lewis, I'd ask him about that too.
Yeah.
I don't even understand those stories. There's genocides that God is going, you do it.
Yeah. There's a Bonhoeffer book called Ethics that he never finished. And for people that don't know who Bonhoeffer is, he's a guy who was imprisoned during Nazi Germany, kind of Hitler's reign of terror, for being caught conspiring to assassinate Hitler, and he was killed on those charges. But he's this pacifist that feels like, well, I do believe that this is the way I'm supposed to live my life, but these atrocities that are happening in my own country are so great that I'm going to come back from the U.S. to Germany to try and do something, to stand up to this, and ultimately going against his pacifism to assassinate, Hitler. That's phenomenal in and of itself. But the book, Ethics, he starts off by saying, ethics is the human study of what's right and wrong. That's his kind of definition, very broad. And then he says the Christian study of ethics is to throw all of that out the window. And his understanding is that, the Garden of Eden, man chooses to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and suddenly creating his own inner understanding of what I should do, rather than being fully reliant on the Creator. So in that sense, becoming somewhat of a creator himself and outside of the jurisdiction of the capital C creator. For me, that was really illuminating when I'm thinking about like this whole concept of right and wrong. That ultimately, I mean, you've got the father of our faith, not only our faith, but Islamic faith, is this guy, Abraham, that is told to kill his son by God. And I mean, let's think about how that plays out if if it happens in modern times. The headline goes, old crazy senile man goes up onto a mountain with his son and a knife, and you got the picture of this crazy old guy gonna kill his son, and that's the father of our faith, you know. So there has to be some element, you know, to bring it back to Kierkegaard, of that leap of faith of like, okay, does God exist? And that's where, for me, that leap of faith is much smaller than God loves me.
I totally agree. What do you feel unlovable?
Absolutely.
Is that the issue? Okay.
Yeah, I feel like if I'm honest with myself, the mass murderer, the Hitler, the rapist, all these horrible things that I read about, I want to distance myself from them. Okay. I want to put them behind bars. Uh-huh. I want to see justice served. But I think part of that is also because those thoughts I had that instant of a thought of, I hate that guy. Uh-huh. I want to kill that guy. Uh-huh. And I think that terrifies me. And
do you feel like a hypocrite ever?
All the time.
All the time.
There are times in my life where I'm like, how can... And that's why, for me, even the idea of calling yourself a Christian, ultimately to say, I am Christ-like. I mean, who can say that? Who can say, I got it.
I'm doing it here. I get it so totally, but I struggle on the air to talk about it because I don't want to say that either. Because it's freighted with a lot of meaning I don't necessarily get. But the other thing is exactly what you're saying. Like, what am I? What am I? And I know I feel helpless, and I know I need God because we're so broken.
Well, I think that's where it all comes back to, the idea that the freedom of Christ, mm-hmm. right? Because all of that is, to go back to Bonhoeffer, is on our own merit of our own wisdom of what is good and what is evil, and our own morality, right? Mm-hmm. Our own ethics. And to say publicly, yes, my own inner compass, whatever you want to call it, my own sense of ethics is irreparably damaged. And suddenly that which I thought I could maybe work up towards being lovable is broken. And so to be able to abandon our own self-aggrandizement program and say, no, I'm completely at your mercy. And I think that, for me, that's the only way I can consider myself a believer, a Christian, any of those high, lofty terms, is to say, I have nothing, therefore I have Christ.
Philip Yancey said, and I totally agreed with him, and I wondered how you felt about this too. It sounds like we're going the same direction. He said, the reason I'm a Christian, or I'm a believer in Jesus and have to trust him, is I'm not sold on the alternatives, and Jesus himself. Like, the alternatives don't offer an explanation for sin and then a solution for it. And then the Jesus himself is so compelling that I can't walk away from him. Would you agree with those two things, or how would you answer that similar question?
Yeah, I mean, these are, again, like Philip Yancey and C.S. Lewis and Bonhoeffer and Kierkegaard. These are people that I feel like they should be in this seat because I'm just this guy who writes songs, you know. And so for me, like, everyone said it better, but when I wrestle with it, I lean on these
I can't
thoughts.
Actually, I wouldn't understand him. I tried to read, and yesterday I was trying to read The Sickness Unto Death.
Yeah.
And I don't understand it. He lost me in the foreword.
He's a weird
He's
dude,
so
man.
smart. I can't.
Yeah.
I literally am like, I gotta stop. And normally that's not as big an issue, but let me get back to like your relationship with God. Is it possible that writing songs can be a way to avoid God?
Yeah. I mean, all of the human endeavors are either moving towards or away from their fears.
Okay, but writing song, like, for people who are like, well, of course, if you write a bad song, no, like you can write a song about God,
Yeah.
and avoid Him in the process.
Yeah, I mean, you could go to church in a God avoidance scheme, right? Like, I can go to church to try and make sure I don't have an encounter with God.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy, but it's true, right?
It's true. It's totally true.
Like, I think the concept of God is terrifying. The concept of me being alone is terrifying. I think I also enjoy talking and meeting people that have completely different viewpoints. You know, and we just made a movie that I had the privilege of interviewing one of the people I grew up listening to. This guy, Greg Graffin, from a band Bad Religion.
Oh yeah.
And he's he'd probably call his religion naturalism. You know, definitely an atheist and a brilliant thinker. You know, again, much smarter than I am. But I think that his songwriting, what I admire about it, is that it's actually going head first into these issues of suffering. And the human experience, to approach it as a songwriter or a poet or a architect or anything, you have to deal with suffering. That's the thing. And I think that a lot of songs that I don't relate to, they don't deal with suffering. And that would be an example of a songwriter that's using music as a way to run away from the things they're afraid of.
I tweeted something the other day, and I'm sure I confused half the people, which is normal. But I said throwing yourself into the pop Christian culture is a great way to avoid God. And it's kind of the same thing, like subscribing to things about God, doing God-related things, consuming God-related merchandise, and necessarily opening yourself as a naked human to His actual self.
Yeah, and I think it almost makes us feel safe. And I get what people are saying when they say safe for the whole family. And, you know, I've got my own daughter, and I'm trying to protect her from these things. Right. But then there's another side of me that says, you know, there's nowhere that's safe. Mm-hmm. Nowhere that's safe. Like, this is unsafe. Mm-hmm. I can be filled with horrible thoughts in the very center of church. Or, conversely, I could be, you know, with the mind of Christ in a really dark place. And one is actually Christ-like, and the other is much more like the people that He came in and overturned the tables and you know, so I think the church is one of the most dangerous places to be a Christian, because we can be so insulated and incubated that we forget about the suffering.
Jesus tells us stories about two brothers, and they're both lost, and one of them doesn't know it.
Right.
I mean, that's what gets it, because he's doing all the good stuff. He's doing all the right stuff.
Yeah.
That's what blows me away about that story. It's so economical. Number one, it's like 2 paragraphs, which is, and we're still unpacking it.
Yeah.
But, like, the older brother, the dad never even says he did anything wrong. Like, he said, didn't I? Wasn't I always here? He's like, yeah, you were.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
But I think the thing that, at the end of that story, I'm struck with is that he didn't...
There is no end.
Yeah, and he didn't understand, like, the fact that right there in front of him, the relationship of his father was there. And that, I think, that for me is is one of those things that sometimes I have to go out into the woods to get, you know. Surfing for me is that, where it's kind of one of those things where I can paddle out and have a prayer that I'm confessing a lot more of my inadequacies, where there's got to be a better way in church where we put up these fronts and everyone knows the pat answers, and it's like this pretend play church. And then you walk into some churches where it's like, oh my gosh, these people are actually real.
Well, you've traveled so
Yeah.
much. You've seen how God works among people that are marginalized or in other countries that aren't affluent, and it does seem like it's less contrived. I mean, I'm not putting them on
Yeah.
a pedestal, but it really
Yeah.
is true if you travel.
Well, we think they have less, but they have more of the things that matter.
I feel like my wife and I were just talking about this, and she's never wanted to move out of the country until we read this book called The Insanity of God. Have you seen this?
No.
It's this guy was in Somalia in the early 90s, and he's just a simple guy. He
Yeah.
didn't purport to be a great writer, but he unpacks the suffering that's going on there and how he had to grapple with it. Then his own son dies while he's there, his teenage son, and his 4 best friends are killed right after they do a communion service. They were tracked into this building, and all of them were executed. And so he's reflecting on persecution, and he travels the world to talk to believers everywhere. And the upshot is they're getting an element of God's goodness that we don't.
Right.
I feel like it's a totally different thing.
Yeah.
And my wife got carried away the same deal. It's like we're missing out on some of his goodness.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not just our Christendom, as Kierkegaard would call it, our culture, that insulates us. It's the postmodern age we live in, where we have everything. Like, there's never been an age like this.
No.
I can look up anything on my phone, anything. That's almost omnipotence. You know, like I can call people around the world. I'm pretty powerful with this little device here in my back pocket, you know? And I feel like I got this friend in South Africa that took us surfing these ridiculously scary waves. This place called the Crayfish Factory. It's freezing cold water. Like, straight out that way is Antarctica. It's where they film Shark Week. Air Jaws, like literally, there's an app called Shark Tracker, and you can see just great whites all over. Those are the ones they have that they're tracking,
Right.
you know. So it's a feeding ground. There's, you know, you're like,
Right.
oh gosh. So and it's huge. The waves are just huge, and we paddled out, and he's this great guy, Dougal, and I got caught in the wrong spot. Took a couple on the head, my board snaps, and I'm just fighting for my life to get back to shore. And I remember talking to him afterwards, and he was like, you know, that is what I feel like one of the things that we miss in our society is we are so far away from death. You know, like in earlier times, war, disease, famine, predators, you know, you're always around death.
Mm-hmm.
Death is
Always.
a known commodity.
Right.
It's something that's going to happen to all of us, and so you're thinking about it. You're aware of it. You're saying, okay, so this is a temporary thing that we have, and I think that's a good thought to think. You know, like, how do we live in that space of saying, this is temporary? And I think that's what you're talking about with that book, you know, the idea that
Oh, absolutely.
this is all transience. You know, well, I got this jacket, I got this face, this stubble, right? I got these shoes, but it can't last more than 70 years,
And
you know?
And I think you become hyper aware of it when you're a parent. Like, this is how fast it's going.
Yeah.
And like, I think that happens. When I saw Fading West as the title, and I didn't know what the movie was about until I just went online last night. I mean, I started to learn.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to do like a treatise on Western civilization declining. I thought that's what it was.
Well, that's good. I like that.
I thought Fading West. I thought, okay, he's been studying civilizational decline, and that's what this was going to be.
The surf film.
I didn't know it's surfing, but that's great. But I've thought the same thing. In a culture that's in decline, and we're in decline, the West is colossally bored.
Yeah.
Just bored out of our minds, and we just go from one like electric shock to the next. Maybe it's a movie or violence or
I
sex.
don't
or
think
something.
we are bored.
You don't think so?
I think that we are so even insulated from our boredom. We just go from app to app, and we to keep from being bored. I think sitting on the mountainside and actually truly being bored for 5 minutes.
I agree.
You know what I mean?
I
That
agree
kind
with
of
you
boredom.
on that. I
Maybe
guess I
positive
get in
boredom.
a larger sense. Like there's no story.
Right.
There's no exploration. There's no larger mission. There's no, like you say, we even ignore death. So that even what should be tons of stories in our own life, we're not even aware of them. We just go from tick, 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 tick to the next movie to the next entertainment hit or something.
Right.
But anyway, I know what you're
It's
saying.
odd too, because I mean I'm in an industry where, you know, we want people to listen to the songs. We want people to watch the movie. We just made a movie. So, but at the same time, like, you know, I think the unasked question is the most dangerous to answer, because it's like this thing that, hey, here's the answer to this question you've never asked. Okay, so that's trash. You know, whereas the moment you actually ask the question, why am I here? Is there a God? Does he love me? And you mean it, then those are going to drive you to your own discovery. And that's something that I think is the only way that the Holy Spirit works. It's like one of those things where it has to be his work. It can't be like any form of social media or song, or you know what I mean?
Totally agree. Tell us about the album too.
So Fading West is a record that was inspired by our trip around the world. As we were making the movie, the goal of the movie, you know, we grew up watching these surf films. We thought the plot is they're surfers chasing waves.
Right.
It's a pretty simple plot, you know. And we thought, what if we made a movie that was about us chasing songs as well as waves? And so there's surfing, there's music, there's a couple shows. It goes behind the scenes a little bit. Some heavy stuff happens, and you know we kind of left it in there. And then the record is the songs that came out of that process. And so I think if I was going to sum it up, the first song on the record, called "Love Alone Is Worth the Fight," is kind of the thesis of the album.
I heard Bono, when he saw Rattle and Hum, had to leave the theater because his face was so big on a big screen. Does it freak you out at all?
I don't watch. We've been showing it for the last 50 nights in a row. I don't. I mean, it's a horrible thing. You think you're something, and then you have any sort of video played back. That's why I hate these things, because you're like, oh, what did I say? I know. So, but for me, the reason why I'm here is because I believe in the songs. And that's what, like we said from the beginning, the goal was to make the songs famous. And how do we do that? Because we believe in those things. And with the movie, it's like, well, how can we tell a story bigger than a 3.5-minute pop song? You know, and so for us, that's a chance to talk about doubts and faith.
Does it freak you out, though? I know we have to be done. We're out of time, I'm sure. But does it freak you out to have people act like you're a big deal when you know you're not?
Yeah. I mean, it's good to have a brother in the band.
Yeah, I bet that's right.
Because it's, you know, there's always somebody to knock you down to size, and that's imperative. Because we're idiots.
Do you think if you didn't have your brother in the band that your perspective on life would be skewed by now?
Absolutely. Everything matters. Everything changes everything. And we wouldn't be a band if it weren't for Tim. No doubt. Yeah, or for Chad or Drew. I mean, every single person that I travel with, it's for a reason, you know.
Well, I didn't get, like, Jerome's a great surfer too.
Well, Jerome and Drew actually joined the band after a couple records.
Yeah.
We had to initiate him. We had to teach him how to surf.
Okay,
you know,
they started then at that. Okay, I wondered.
I think Drew kind of surfed a little bit growing up, but you know, the three of us, we were the ones who were like more competitive about it, a little bit more excited about the way.
Right. My limited surfing exposure, and I tried repeatedly, it led me to different sorts of encounters with God. I would say more terror-based.
Terror is a good thing, though.
Yes, it
fear
is.
is underrated, man. We have very little things to be afraid of, but those adrenaline shocks of like, oh my gosh, that car almost hit me,
Right.
or oh my gosh, my daughter just almost this or that.
Uh-huh.
You realize what matters, you know. In that moment, you're like, this tweet, this Instagram, this what is this?
Okay, truly last question. Speaking of tweets and stuff, are you insecure at all? I mean, well, I'm sure you are. I guess.
Yeah.
What makes you insecure?
I mean, the same reason why I think I have doubts that God loves me. You know, like I'm very aware of my own insignificance, and I think one of the big human questions is meaning. What matters?
Does that mean if somebody pokes you, like if somebody were to say, John Foreman thinks he's a big shot, but he's not? Like, I'm always worried about that with me.
For me, it's more just like, does anything I do matter? Does anything that I have accomplished, does any of this mean anything?
And it really picks you up to read some Kierkegaard.
More of a fundamental, like, existential, like,
Right.
does anything matter? And that's, I feel like some of my insecurities are driven by that hurry up and matter kind of mentality.
I'm sorry that I'm laughing. It's just because I identify with it. I'm not laughing at
Yeah.
it.
No, it's
Sitting here like, your existential value.
You don't matter, do you?
He doesn't matter. All right, that's awesome.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
That's
thanks
great.
for your
We spent a lot of
time.
It was,
Yeah.
it